So for session 1, using Hilt in your app, let me switch to the Colab tab. I should paste the link to the Colab in the chat so that people can follow that on their own machine, because I'll be switching over to Windows Studio soon. So basically, this is just telling you how to use dependency injection to an app that is already using some sorts of manual in DI, and usually people use DI to basically make sure things are isolated and not tightly coupled, and it's good for testing and it's good for your code organization. So yeah, and it also basically says there are some things you can read about DI by going through these. And in this Colab, well, you will have an existing app, and you'll go through it and add dependency injection through using Hilt instead of the already pre-wrapped kind of service locator type of pattern. So let's see what's next. Clone the code and open it in Android Studio, run the sample app, and then if you check out the code on GitHub, then we will start on the master branch. And if you got stuck, the solution is in solutions branch, or you can download the final code. That's fine. So it says open the project in Android Studio and run it and see what happens. So I'm going to switch over to Android Studio, and oh, sorry for the jump. And then Android Studio. Can everyone see the code fine? I can read the code here, so I'm going to assume it's fine. And so it says run the app. Please interact with the buttons to track your click. So there's a log window that shows nothing. Button 1, 2, 3 shows button 1, 1, 2, 3. And then if we exit, sorry, that's another Colab logging. See the logs, it's still there. And if we say 2, and 2, and we can delete the logs and they're all gone. And 1, 2, 3, see logs. It's all like it's adding map. So that's what this app does. Then we'll go into step 3, adding Hilt to the project. So if you start looking at code, you can see this is a service locator class. So let's see, app source main Java. Here's the service locator. It basically provides data formatter, navigator, and I suppose components throughout the app just use this service locator. Doesn't seem like it, but let's go through the README, I guess. As explained in the DI guidance, service locators start with relatively little boilerplate, but scale poorly. Yeah. So Hilt in your project, it's already configured in the master branch. Just make sure, yes, I'm on the master branch. And let's see the build.gradle. So build.gradle, lots of out-of-date dependencies. I'm not going to update them because that will probably throw us off by a lot. So here they basically define Hilt to be 2.35 that matches the Colab, and Gradle plugin can update to full 2.2, but again, I'm not going to update that for now, unless we hit a problem. But other than that, to use Hilt, it is annotation processor. So you'll need to make sure you call it like the Hilt compiler using KAPT instead of just including the implementation. So that's something, and similar to Room, which also is like another annotation processor. So yeah, I'm going to ignore these, although like the usual me will just like start Alt Enter and start updating it, but that will probably bring us a app that doesn't work. So anyway, on to step 4, Hilt in your application class, similar to how instance service locator in the log. So yeah, it's initialized here, create service locator. We are going to just say add a notation, Hilt Android app. And it triggers code generation. So it will create a base class over your application, and then, okay, I suppose we're ready to use Hilt somehow. So what happens if I build? Okay. Doesn't seem to change anything. Good, it hasn't break our app. Okay, let's continue on to next. Field injection with Hilt. Instead of grabbing dependency on demand from a service locator, we'll use Hilt to provide these dependencies. Okay, so logs fragment. So it's in the UI. Log fragment.kt. Where do we use the service locator for? Oh, here. We grab the logger and date formatter from the service locator. So I suppose we're going to change it to like use Hilt. So we'll add Android entry point annotation here, and then the doc says it supports application, activity, fragment, view, service, and broadcast receiver. That's pretty much everything. However, it only supports activity extends fragment activity and fragment that extend Jetpack fragment. Cool. So yeah, don't make sure you use the Jetpack version of the fragment and fragment activity. And there's a warning: does not support retained fragments. I seldom use retained fragments, so I guess I'm not missing anything yet. Next step is actually annotate the things that we want to use. Here in this fragment, we are grabbing logger and date formatter from the service locator. So the thing says change it to inject. Okay. And then also date format is inject. So logger and date formatter. Okay. And then yeah, using that annotation on the Android class fields you want to be injected by Hilt. However, it cannot be private for obvious reasons. It's probably not going to generate like getter setters, and yeah, as Hilt will be in charge of populating a field, we don't need populated fields anymore. So let's remove it and remove that. So well, our text is gray, so we can also just remove it. And what else? I think that's it. So to perform field injection, you need to know how to provide instances. So I guess if we build it right now, it will just say, yeah, missing all these. So under the hood, Hilt still delegates work to Dagger. So the fun of Dagger error, I mean, I would expect like the fun of the usual Dagger missing binding that provides like, I don't know, that generates 10 pages of error message that you can't really read. Okay, this is less than a page. So it's a logger local data source. It doesn't know how to inject these. So yeah, okay. So we need to tell it how to inject this. So we need to do open util date formatter. Okay, let's go back to the actual code, util date formatter, and we'll add a constructor to it. So in Kotlin, you usually do constructor that way, but if you have to add annotation to the constructor, you'll need to use the constructor keyword. This thing doesn't need any actual parameters, so we'll just add inject. And similarly, we need to do that to the logger data source. So that's in the data package, and it's here. So we'll say inject, and then make a constructor. However, without further reading the instruction, I suppose we'll need to also tell like how to get this log file onto the dependency graph. So I guess that'll be the next step. So basically, by annotating the two classes, date formatter and logger local data source with inject, we're telling Dagger or Hilt that we need to create bindings for them. I'm not going to go into actual details of like how Dagger works or how the dependency graph is created because I don't have a way to explain it clearly. I have to admit, even though I use Dagger at work, but it's like I try and error, and until I hit something that works and I forget about it. Next time when I need to set up Dagger, I'll go through the same trial and error cycle again to like wander into a solution that kind of works. So I never understood Dagger, and I hope Hilt can like be easier for me to understand in my own projects, where I'm actually on my own. I usually lean on others to like help me on that. But anyway, on to step 6. Scoping instances to containers. What does that mean? We can use annotation to scope instances to containers. As Hilt can produce different containers, different life cycles. So I assume like containers are defined like such as something that has life cycle equal to the application or to an activity or to a fragment, and then you assign your bindings, your injected things to such component. So on step 6, it says add Singleton to local data source. Okay, so we can read more about the component scopes from the documentation. There's a link to it, and yeah, so Singleton, the scope Singleton is basically tied to the application. And since the local data source should be one instance, so I guess Singleton makes sense. And then in the green box, if a bounding is available in a container, then it's available in all containers below that one in the component hierarchy. Therefore, the instance will be available in a vacation container, will also be available in activity and fragment containers. Okay. However, the last sentence, because logdal is the interface, we cannot annotate it with inject. So next step is how to create logdal, I guess. So on to step 7, it says Hilt modules. Modules are used to add bindings to Hilt. In other words, it tells Hilt how to provide instances of different types. Okay, so module is actually similar to Dagger's module, where you have like provides and for bindings to either bind an instance of some classes to the dependency graph, or actually like manufacture or create new instances right there. So I guess it's a similar concept that they just like inherited from Dagger. And so a Hilt module is a class annotated with add module and install in. Module tells Hilt that the module, and installing tells the container. Okay, so it's like we're going to install this into say the Singleton component that we just declared, I guess, or some other component such as like if we want to inject it into a view scope, view model, then we'll just say like view model component. Okay, creating a module. Let's create a Hilt module. Create a new package called di. Okay. Let's see, new package dot di. Okay, new package created. And then since longer the scope to the application, logdal binding needs to be available and blah, blah, blah. So let's create a new class called database module.pt. Sure, added to get install in Singleton component class and then module. Okay, so now it also says since this is a single thing, so we can say object in Kotlin to basically create another Singleton for it. In the service locator, DAO is obtained by log database.logdal. We have transition dependency on app database class. So we'll say fun provide logdal is using database logdal equals database.logdal. Okay, and then we'll annotate that with provides. So this tells Dagger, how to provide logdel is by grabbing an instance of app database and then call logdel, and then return that instance as into set it to like inject it into whatever that needs it. Then I guess we need to also tell Dagger how to get an instance of the app database. And yes, that's the next step. Our project doesn't own app database class either because it's generated by room. Can't inject app database, but we can use a provide function to provide it too. So I'm going to just copy paste. So it's a singleton and then context, and room. So it calls room database builder with app context, and then using this to tell room like this is the type of database I want to create, and then it's backed by logging.db on disk. So if we switch back to service locator, is that how this database is created? Let's see, split right. So in this provides function, room database, which looks exactly the same. So yes, we're basically just moving the function that's creating the app database from the service locator out into a module. And we want to make sure it's still a singleton. So now you can see a list of predefined bindings and component default bindings section of the document. Sure. And then we need to say something before we run the app, I suppose. Now, Hilt has all the necessary information. However, before running the app, needs to be aware of the activity that hosts the fragment in order to work. We'll need to use Android entry point. So it says add Android endpoint entry point to main activity before we run. So let's run it. I suppose it will build a bit longer. No, it's actually done. Cool. Okay, no logs. Okay, delete logs. It's all gone. Cool. We haven't break the app. So now we need to actually remove the service locator. Currently, main blah blah blah. Okay, main uses service locator to get the navigator, and then app navigator is an interface. Again, we cannot use constructor, so we need to let's see, to tell Hilt what implementation to use for an interface, you can use the binds annotation inside a module. Binds must annotate an abstract function. Okay, so that what does that mean? That means you don't have to actually write the function that returns the object. Dagger generates it for you. So that's why we want to leave them as abstract. So we can add this function to there. No, we shouldn't because it's in the UI. So let's see. For better organization, should convey to the type of info it provides. And also, database module is single component, which is like a longer lifecycle than the main activity. So yeah, that's why they came to the conclusion we should put a new navigation module, but still in the DI folder. So navigation, hope I didn't have a typo. It installs in activity component class, and then also a module. And different from the database module, this is an abstract class, and then it also have an abstract binds function that binds implementation to interface navigator and app navigator. So we can blah blah blah. It's an abstract function. Now we can tell Hilt. Now we have to tell Hilt how to provide the app navigator function. We will make sure the actual implementation of the navigator is injected, or in. So again, we come here, add a constructor, and it's annotated with inject. So this is basically satisfying Dagger's requirement to like annotate the the classes that you want to create with inject. But don't quote me on that. So app navigator depends on fragment activity. App can provide an activity container, fragment activities already available as a predefined binding. Yeah, so that's actually good because I think you might need to, in the like pure Dagger one, you will need to also add like a binding to a fragment activity by like provides, and then in your application setup, you need to somehow inject that too. Hilt takes care of that, so that's good. Now, using Hilt in activity, it's probably similar to using Hilt in the fragment. We have the entry point already, so now we need to basically say the navigator is injected. And then we can remove that. Remove the thing that grabs it from the navigator. Do we need to call inject in unattach? Oh, we don't. Okay, so I guess they created more. They wrote more code for me. So let's run the app again and see if I make anything that breaks it. So I can create logs, delete logs. They're all gone. 1, 2, 3. I should see 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Yes. Okay. So the app is still working. Good. We can continue to refactor. The only class that's still used in the service navigator is buttons fragment. Oh, okay. Buttons fragment is the one that you see the buttons with button 1, 2, 3 and show log, delete log. So let's basically do the same thing. Buttons fragment, enter an entry point, and then we'll inject the logger and inject the navigator. And then where do we grab those? So again, remove the unattached and populate fields. What else? I think that's it, right? So notice that the instance logger local data source will be same using logs fragment, and instance navigator different from instance in activity. We have to scope it to respect its activity container. That's okay. So it's basically saying this one, the logger local data source is tied to application lifecycle scoped instance of the logger, but the navigator is tied to. It's actually how should I say? It'll be different from the one in the main activity because we did not say like which component the navigator binds to. It just says it's in activity component. It doesn't mean it will be actually this main activity. Maybe there will be something that changes it later. So let's see. Say service locator is no longer needed. So all we need to do is change the log application back to this. So an Hilt Android app annotated application class is all you need. So now we have the basic content covered. What you learned should be enough to use Hilt as dependency injection tool in your Android application. From now on, we'll add functionality to our app to learn how to use more advanced Hilt features in different situations. Okay. And we're on step 9, qualifiers. In this section, you'll learn about how to scope the activity container and what qualifiers are. Let's see. Let's start abstracting the data source into an interface. Create a new file, logger data source under the data folder. Okay. New column interface or logger data source. Sure. And then don't suggest me to delete it because no one uses it. I just created it. Logger there are both fragments, button and logger fragment, so we need to use them. So let's go to the logger fragment. So this one should be changed to logger data source. And then the one in the button should also become logger data source. And then let's make logger data source implement that. So that means we need to add override to these. Copy, paste, paste. That should be good. And then we'll also tell okay. The next step is add another implementation called in-memory data source. Okay. New. Let's see. Logger in-memory data source class. I'm going to just copy paste from the doc. So it's basically a logger source that's backed by linked list. So we can now say, let's see, to be able to use logger in-memory data source as an implementation detail, we need to tell Hilt how to provide instance of this type. So again, we need to grab its constructor to add inject annotation before we can use it. And then this only has one activity. We should have the instance logger in memory in the activity container reuse across fragments. Okay. We need to basically say this thing will be scoped to the activity. So that's why you said activity scoped. There are links to like scoping to component documentation to basically tell you like what component you should use, what scope you should use for the component. So supposedly at this point, Hilt knows how to provide in-memory data source and logger data source, but logger data source. So Hilt doesn't know which implementation to use because, yeah, if you look at like implementation of logger data source, we have in-memory and the local one. And yes, they're both annotated to inject. So I think if we build it right now, there might be some error. Yes. Yeah, logger data source is injected. Well, actually, this is because of missing binding because we updated we updated the implementation to use the interface, but we never changed the how we get the logger, right? So we can use the bind annotation to tell which one, but what if we need both in the same project? For example, use an in-memory while the app is running, and then use local data source in a service. I never thought of organizing my app that way, but okay, maybe that's needed sometimes. So let's create a new file in DI called Logger Module. Okay, so here in DI, we'll create a new Logger Module. Sure, edit to Git, and I'm just going to copy paste because it's faster than me typing. But of course, needs all the imports, Singleton, binds, and all these. So what is this saying is it will find the local data source in a singleton component. So that's basically application component, or it will find the in-memory data source when you are in application in an activity. So now it knows how to like provide data source, but following the doc, it will say now you have duplicate binding. And yes, it indeed is duplicate binding because again, back to the documentation, things in the singleton scope component will be available to like the in the hierarchy. So when you go down to activity component, the logger data source that's provided in the logging database in the Singleton module will clash with the logger that's like find it here. So what do we need to do? We need to use qualifiers. So now we'll need to basically add two qualifiers to this module. So one is the memory logger, one is database logger. And I suppose we'll add this to the database logger. This is in memory logger. And wherever those are used, we'll also need to add the qualifiers to tell Hilt like which one do we want. Let's see. These qualifiers must be used at the injection point when the implementation we want to be injected. Okay, so we'll use the in-memory in our fragments. So let's go to our logs fragment. So log data source will say it uses in-memory logger, and then same for the buttons. Okay, now if you want to change the database implementation you want to use, you just need to annotate inject fields with database logger instead of in-memory logger. So then ask us to run the app. So now when we run the app, it will be using the in-memory logger. So you see the logs are empty. Or here. So if we exit, come back. If this is not killed, the app will still be there, but it's probably killed. So no more logs retained. Yeah. But if we say this is using database logger, and this is also using database logger, and we run it again, I suppose we'll see the old logs. Oh no. Okay. But we come back, yes, it will be there. So yeah, that's how you switch at compile time. Now we're on to step 10, UI testing. Now the app is fully migrated to Hilt. We can also migrate the instrumentation test that we have in the project. Oh, so this one does have an instrumentation test. It's in Android test, it's app test, and it's all red. Why? Let's see. Oh, because it used the service locator. That's why it's red. We removed it. Fine, we'll fix it. So now we need to add the testing dependencies. I think they're already in, right? Yes. So we'll need to actually no. Okay, we haven't added the test implementation, so we will make sure we have Hilt Android testing and Hilt Android compiler for the test KPD Android test, and let's make Gradle work for a bit. The implementation test using Hilt must be executed in an application that supports Hilt. So blah, blah, blah. So we need to change the application class at the same level as fTest.kt here. Create a new file called custom test runner. Okay, new custom test runner. And I'm just going to copy paste. It's a JUnit runner, but so it's basically like swapping the new application with Hilt test application. Okay. Then once we have the test runner, we need to tell that we want to use ours. So it's come example dot inquiry dot Hilt dot custom test runner. Okay, think again. Now we're ready to use Hilt in your UI tests. I mean, yeah, sync complete. So now back to app test. We still need to tear this down. But before that, we'll say Hilt Android test, not Hilt Android app, and then use a rule, UI test rule. No, well, JUnit test rule. Var Hilt equals Hilt Android rule. This. Okay, and then Now run the test using click button. What? How? This won't work, right? Wait, how can this work? There's no service locator anymore. Was the string intact from button 1? Oh, what is this test? It tests perform click, perform click. Okay, it opens the log and try to check if there's log there. I mean, we don't even need that because there's no more service locator, but oh, I see. I know why it broke the first time because it had more logs than it expected. Yeah, so we can't. We need to actually have that tear down code. I don't know. Like, let's see. I'm going to take a look at. Let's see. Compare. Git compare with branch solution. So in the solution code, they actually remove the tear down. Okay, but that just means on the next run, if they keep using the database logger, it will just fail. Well, this is a collab, and we know why it breaks. So okay, okay, move on. Now in this section, we're on to step 11. In this section, we'll say how to use entry point annotation inject dependencies. That's not supported by Hilt. What? The use case. Oh, we want to export logs outside of application process. So that we need to use a content provider. And we'll use room database to retrieve the data, and logdel should expose method that return required info using a cursor. Logdel.kd, okay. Okay, logdel.kd. And they want us to add two functions so that will expose a cursor, and that'll be like used by the content provider. So a content provider, in case if you don't know, is a way to expose our own data to the system without with some control, so that you can grant access to other app to your data without letting them actually know you're backing that data somehow. Anyway, we added that to the logdel following. We're on step 11, and then we'll need to create a new content provider. So we will add a file under content provider directory. We don't have a content provider directory, so I guess we'll need to create one. A new package, content provider, and then new file, common class, logs content provider. Sure, and I'll just copy paste the whole thing. I can't type this much. Okay, that's a very long copy paste. Now it has a red thingy called get logdel, so we need to probably figure how to grab this. We need to implement by grabbing the logdel dependency from Hilt application container. However, Hilt doesn't support injecting into a content provider out of the box. Well, yeah, because Hilt only provides things that are commonly used. So we need to create an interface annotated with entry point to access it. Entry point in action. Entry point is an interface with an accessor method at each binding type we want. So it also needs to be annotated with install in. So now we need to say a new interface here. interface modes content provider entry point on novel. Well, okay, and it is entry point and installs in Singleton component class. So with that, we now need to actually access it. Use appropriate select method from entry point accessors. Blah 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 blah. Now implement getDel method using this that's missing. Okay, so another copy paste action. Here, we actually created a get model and use entry point accessor from application with this log. So now we have the entry point and we can call this function. So basically, Hilt will auto-generate a class that is implementing the logs content provider interface, and we can grab the log from that interface. So it should compile. And to be honest, we have no way to test if that content provider works because you need to have some other app that accesses the content. But at least I'm going to check if we break the app at all. Logs, it's not there. Okay. Okay. That's it. Come back. That's it. Okay. Cool. So that's the Hilt Collab. So you learned how to set up the your app by just annotating your app with a Hilt Android class, and then you also know how to use Android entry point, and then use modules to tell Hilt how to provide things, and use qualifiers to like specify which instance or which type you want in a certain situation. With that, that's the end of this collab. We are actually not yet an hour. I'm glad this is fast, but this is too fast. Any questions? If not, I will stop recording. Wait, how do I stop recording? Stop recording.